Hello, I'm Nakhavali, and you're watching and listening to the Middle East Analitika. On this episode, we speak about the political situation in Lebanon. I speak with Hadi Wahab, PhD candidate at the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies at the University of Exeter.
Hadi, thank you very much for joining Middle East Analitika.
Not at all. Thank you for hosting me.
Lebanon is a parliamentary democratic republic with a system of government based on the 1943 National Pact, which established a power-sharing agreement among the country's different religious communities. The Lebanese political system is characterized by constitutionalism, which means that political power is distributed among the different religious groups in the country. Could you please briefly tell us why the political system is so complex in Lebanon?
Miyad, first we should backtrack a little. You can't speak about Lebanon without going back to the 19th century. In the 1840s and later on in the 1860s, let's say sect-coded conflicts occurred in Mount Lebanon between Druze and Christians,
right,
which were the main sects dominating and cohabiting Mount Lebanon. These conflicts resulted later in what was called قائم قامية and متصرفية. These two systems were kind of an old, if you want, ruling system for Lebanon, which is consociational. And the main problem then was that these were the first, you could say, in the recent history, sect-coded clashes.
Mm-hmm.
By implementing the قائم قامية and the متصرفية, we kind of legitimized power-sharing systems. So the European powers, instead of creating, let's say, a secular or non-sectarian system, they implemented sectarianism for their benefits.
Right.
From then on, the story started. That's what happened briefly. And you could go from then until the creation of Greater Lebanon, if you want, in 1920. Come then to the 1943 and the so-called independence. All this was again implemented. So they implemented the consociational system, which is the power sharing agreement known by the National Pact in 1943. What happened is that not even everyone was included in that consensus. So part of the Christians agreed with part of the Muslims on how to rule the country. First, that was not enough, and if you ask me, that's not the way to rule. And now and in the future, hope not, but these are the facts. We're gonna know every time that this kind of, in my personal opinion, again, this kind of ruling system or this kind of consociation and democracy is a self-generating system that creates problem, that it produces them and reproduces them every 15, 20 years. If you count from 1920, the creation of Lebanon, then 1943, then the small war in 1958, and then the civil war from 1975 until 1990, and then in 2005, Hariri's assassination, the prime minister, and then Syria's withdrawal, and then you come back to the 2019 now and what's happening. So every 15, 20 years, it's like a cycle. And I understand that there's always a rise and fall in politics, but it's too fast in Lebanon. Every generation lives maybe 10, 15 good years, and then everything collapses. Now, that's the perfect example. And the problem is that no one, maybe it's too soon to speak about it in our conversation, but not even in the 2019 uprising, not in 2005, not in the 58. Every time we rise, or like a political problem happen, or a schism, it's for political reasons. No one, like, they always seek to take power instead of seeking to change the system.
Right.
So I'm gonna give you like an example that we all know. In 2005, when Syria withdrew, everyone was saying that we couldn't do anything in these 15 years because of Syria.
Right.
Let's say that this is a valid argument. Then what happened when Syria left? It's even 100 times worse. So it's not the problem. The problem is us, and we're not targeting the core of the problem. And even now, like, everyone is speaking, maybe we're gonna go to a new consensus or something. Maybe not. But if something changes, it's gonna be a new consensus, but on different proportions. But a new consensus is gonna create, again, in 2030, I don't know when, another problem. Because we're not creating a secular system that treats you like, I'm gonna say, like we are treated in Europe when we go, as tourists. You're treated as tourists in Europe better than you're treated here. Not humiliated every day with everything. I'm not gonna go into these
So that
details.
is the solution that you think that probably the way out of this deadlock could be some sort of secularism for Lebanon.
Well, not only that, but I mean that's the political way. With it, in parallel, you have to have economic solutions, clear economic solutions, fighting corruption, nepotism, clientelism, all these, like. But you need a strategy, and that strategy, to do all these, you need to start with a secular state, because like what happened in 2019 when protesters, they speak against, let's say, Hadi or Miyad and his Sunni or Shia or Christian or whatever, his supporters will rise. No, you can't speak.
Right.
Because that's how it happens. That's
I don't know if I may now to add to this. I was about getting to the point of election.
Yeah, I don't want to rush it. So yeah.
So I don't know if I may ask that question. The presidential election in Lebanon, which took place in 2016, of course, following a 2.5 year political deadlock, and resulted in the election of Michel Aoun, a former army commander and leader of the Free Patriotic Movement. His election, of course, was seen as the victory of his allies, namely Hezbollah and Iran. Who are the key players this time, and when do you believe that the deadline could be broken?
There's no deadline, to be clear about that, and no one knows. No one knows. It's like always, we have to wait, unfortunately, until external powers agree.
Right.
And maybe the Saudi-Iran rapprochement could be the beginning of something. But this beginning, it might take, I don't know, 3-4 months, 1 year. The problem in this country, weirdly, is that it keeps functioning even if you don't have a president for 2 years or 3 years. And this is one of the problems also. The constitution also needs like amendments, because how can you live without a president? So, now the two names that everyone is speaking about is the chief of the army, General Aoun, or Sulaiman Franji. But in Lebanon, you don't know. Maybe, like we say here, maybe someone has a name in the pocket, and at the last minute, it's gonna be out. No one knows. No one has a name, that's for sure. And no one knows where the negotiations will lead at the end, because in 2016, the situation was very different. Hezbollah was fighting in Syria. It was a time of conflict.
Right.
So they pressed or played the last card. But now it's different. You've seen here, and even now, we've heard yesterday that some things on the ground started changing, not only in Yemen. In Yemen, it started like 2 weeks ago, but now it seems in Lebanon something is happening because of the Saudi-Iran agreement.
Right. We'll get to that point.
We need to wait until things unravel. But yesterday, in the media, like Hezbollah started closing, as it seems, the media outlets of the anti-Saudi regime in Beirut, and that's a precedent. So we will have to wait, but there's no time for that. But until now, it's between these two names.
Okay, Hadi, you mentioned regional powers like Iran and Saudi Arabia. We know that Iran has traditionally supported Hezbollah, while Saudi Arabia traditionally supported Sunni Muslim politicians and groups, including Future Movement, led by former Prime Minister Saad Hariri. What impact do you believe the dispute between Iran and Saudi Arabia in the region has had on Lebanon? And also, as you mentioned, do you believe that this recent developments between Iran and Saudi Arabia, of course, mediated by China, could eventually change the situation in Lebanon?
Yeah. Unfortunately, in Lebanon, it's always about mediations. So let's say that we are divided now on who's president. When the regional and international community agree on a name, everyone's going with that name. It doesn't matter what they say or what they do. No one cares. And now, at this moment, like before, it was between, let's say, we used to call it SS, which is Saudi Arabia, Syria. So these two poles used to decide, of course, with the agreement of the US, they used to decide who's president. Now it's between Saudi Arabia and Iran mainly, of course, with the acceptance of the US. So yes, it will eventually lead to a president, which is good for Lebanon. But here we have to go back to the same thing. When they fight, we're gonna be into the same loop again. We're gonna turn into this circle, and problems are gonna happen again. That's the main problem. But unfortunately, that's, let's say, a realist view to the facts. That's what happens. When they agree, that's good. But the problem is, we Lebanese always think that the world evolves around us, and that's like, who cares about Lebanon now? There's Ukraine, there's China, there's all these. Who cares? Like, we hope that this agreement will be translated into something good in Lebanon. Yes, but that's not the top priority.
Right.
Iran has its economic problems, which also extends to Syria and Lebanon. And Saudi Arabia has a security problem, which I guess they agreed upon that, and that's obvious in Yemen. It will result into something in Lebanon, yes, but again, no one knows when and how. Because also there's an important point to mention here, that Saudi Arabia with MBS is different than before. All Lebanese who went to Saudi Arabia felt that there is no interest in that. And I guess that the Saudis' decision making has changed, because they think if they made a deal with Syria, Lebanon comes next. It's like the domino effect, if you want, because that's geography. And
Right.
they consider maybe if they made an agreement with Syria, Hezbollah's role will diminish. So that's an important point. We still have to wait until it unravels, but it seems something's going on, because it's a humanitarian aid after the earthquake, but there's something political, and now they're speaking about like returning embassies and all these. And I guess it seems Syria also is going to attend the Arab League.
Right.
So that's not easy to agree to.
How do you consider the superpowers role in Lebanon? We know that for example, United States and France have had a long history of involvement in Lebanon, particularly in the context of its politics and security. Um, in your opinion, what are the Western countries' top priority in Lebanon?
That's Miyad what I told you. We think that they don't sleep without thinking about us. Like the US, they have a major problem with China. The world order is changing. It's not Lebanon that's changing the world order. We're 0.001% of the problem. So the Middle East is definitely a buffer zone, if we want to say, between somehow, let's, I don't like using these words, but between the West and the East, and it's a buffer zone against China, but it doesn't seem to be controllable yet now by the US, especially. It's not like it's not easy to say that China mediated between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That's something big. So yes, they care about Lebanon because also look at the facts. The US is not building one of the biggest embassies in Lebanon just to leave the country and go. That's for sure. But now, if you ask me what interests the US and Lebanon, I would say two things. First, the refugees, that's for sure, and the Israeli-Lebanese conflict. So Hezbollah and Israel. And what we don't understand or don't know how to demystify is that the US consider, like, if you read, let's say, the memoirs of US diplomats, you would understand that they consider that some things are manageable. Not everything can be solved. So I think they play on this equilibrium, which is needed for everyone. And that's how the deal in South Lebanon was made for, like, the petrol.
Right.
So it wouldn't be signed without guarantees that nothing is gonna happen. I don't believe so. There's no way like that it would happen and Israel would start like using these oil fields, these gas fields, without a guarantee that nothing's gonna happen, unless something explodes at the end, but I don't see it.
Right. Let me get back to one other issue, which is also important, and that's the relationship between Israel and Lebanon, which has been tensed and marked by conflict for many decades. There were many clashes between the two countries. We know that. We remember actually the 34 Days War in 2006. What impact do you believe that the new administration will have on this relationship, and which scenarios can you predict?
I don't think that something is gonna happen in Lebanon. Again, I would relate it um, to the gas agreement and all these. It wouldn't happen if there's no guarantees of peace. But today Israel hit in Syria and yesterday again, and now I've read like 15 minutes ago that some Iranian, I don't know what's his rank, he was killed in Syria. So I don't think it's gonna stop. And in Lebanon, like every time, or even in the region, we say that when Israel is internally in conflict or they have internal problems, or let's say the prime minister, especially Netanyahu, with his judicial problems, would say maybe to draw attention or to stop these problems or this internal dilemma, he would hit outside Israel. But I don't think he's now in a situation to do that because the US, like, they're pressuring him. He has internal pressure. He doesn't want a war. He doesn't want it, but it doesn't mean he's gonna stop hitting.
Right.
But what would that, like? It's not like you can't predict anything. But when you play on the red line, you might cross it, and it might lead to something bigger. But I don't think, because we don't have to forget when speaking about all this that the war in Ukraine is still raging. So Europe still needs the gas. It needs it before next winter. So it needs it from Israel. Would you like risk going into a war then? And I need to remind of something, that when the French met with Hezbollah last year, 2022, I guess, and that's very important. They told them that we need you for this Mediterranean circle. We need you there to protect the gas.
Right.
That's not something like that passes. It's something very important. That's why I'm telling you some things are manageable for them. For France, for the US, some things are manageable. It doesn't mean that they want to end Hezbollah, and they're more pragmatic than we all think. They negotiated with Taliban, who negotiates with, if a state, or let's say not a state, the US, if they were able to negotiate with Taliban, I don't ever think that they would have a problem negotiating with Hezbollah. It's obvious, like how they're negotiating with Iran.
Okay, Hadi, let me move to other issue, which is for me, let's say, the most interesting event in the Arab world, and that's Arab Spring. So in Lebanon, the Arab Spring protest began in early 2011, inspired by the popular uprising, of course, in Tunisia and Egypt. The protests were fueled by a range of economic, social, and political problems. However, despite this widespread demonstration, there were few significant changes in Lebanese political system, which remained deeply divided along sectarian lines. Why is that so? And do you see how do you see the legacy of the Arab Spring for Lebanon? Is there any legacy of Arab Spring for Lebanon?
First, let me say I have contradictions in my head about whether it's an Arab Spring or an Arab Autumn. Like, did it do good or did it destroy the Arab countries?
Right.
I've written before that, like, what happened in the Arab Spring is like the domino effect theory, you know, so it went all along. But it destroyed everything, unfortunately. Look at the countries, Yemen, Syria, these are like, we should have learned from what happened in Iraq in 2003. The country was destroyed. There's no peace, no rest for anyone. We made these mistakes again, Libya, Yemen, Syria, and it had spillovers all over the countries. Like, we have 1.5 something million refugees in Lebanon. The economic situation couldn't like be more like aggressive on Lebanon. And the thing that what happened in Lebanon is, you know, the it started like the peak, like, or something actual happened in 2015, and then it extended until 2019. It was good, I would say. Like, there was somehow hope. Put aside the let's say the traditional parties that used these demonstrations for their political purposes. But there was hope. When you go to the demonstrations, you would see like university students, young guys, young women. You would see that they had hope somehow. Unfortunately, gradually, this hope was destroyed. Because like now we're saying that we went, okay, it's a joke, but we went to we took the streets for $6 on the tax on the WhatsApp. The Lebanese lira is now 100,000. No, we can't see anyone. Somehow, let's speak academically, somehow the Lebanese system has proven to be strong, undestroyable. I'm not speaking about politicians. I'm speaking about this system. This constitutional system has proved to be very strong, and the politicians could still mobilize people using sectarian identities as tools against the non-sectarian demonstrators. You know, like rebels, they went into the streets, lifted كلهم يعني كلهم, which is all, like everyone against everyone. You could see, like, if a demonstration happens against this guy in his region, they will say, oh, that's a conspiracy against us. They will mobilize people. They will beat the demonstrators. So, and that happened everywhere. So you would look like all politicians, they fight against each other. And each one of them is saying that these protests are conspiracies against each one of them. So, you know, it's like everyone is turning the rifle towards him. Like, they're targeting me. Why me? Like, go target, I don't know, another sect.
Right.
That's
Hadi,
why I'm telling you,
yeah,
a secular state,
sorry for
yeah, a
interrupting.
secular state
Okay,
might be a
so
solution.
it's actually very interesting when you're mentioning the Arab Spring and the hope, because it was the same when the Persian Spring or Green Movement has happened in Iran, and I was in those protests, and you just remind me those moments. But we have 10 more
Yeah,
minutes, so I have two
yeah,
more questions. So I'll make this really quick, and I would like to know your opinion about the terrorism in Lebanon. We know that it has a long history in this country since the civil war from 1975 until 1990s and probably until today. Um, do you have any hope that this new administration would do anything about this very important issue?
Miyad, we like to clarify this thing. You need to come and see the poverty in the areas where terrorism is active. If you have a state that gives them opportunities, they can go to school, universities, find jobs. I can guarantee that there's gonna be no terrorism. But if you go to a city like Tripoli and 50% of the people have no food to eat, they don't have jobs, okay, and what else are they gonna do? They only have religion to, like, a salvation, if you want to say, to use. They go to mosques, they get mobilized. And I'm not saying that everyone who goes to mosques get mobilized, but they have nothing else, a sanctuary, if you want. And there they are recruited because they have nothing to do. They have nothing to do. So yeah, we can like find a solution for that. It's through education, through job opportunities, which unfortunately I can't see. Like, even now, if a new administration comes, what did we do in the 30 years ago? In the 1990s, we didn't create job opportunities for anyone.
Right.
We went to economic policies which are based on, let's say, taking money from rentier states, on building houses. Okay, so that's not how you build an economy. You don't have plans for agriculture. You don't have plans for anything. That's how you make plans. And now, unfortunately, I can't see that it's gonna happen.
Hadi, as a last question, you know that we are recording this podcast in Belgrade, the
Yeah,
former capital of Yugoslavia. And you know what has happened in Yugoslavia during the 90s, and you know the war between Orthodox Serbs, Bosnian and Albanian Muslims, and Catholic Croats. And then when I was just reading some articles before talking to you about Lebanon, I was just thinking you can find many similarities between today Lebanon and Yugoslavia at that time. What
you
is
could do
the
a book about it.
yes? What do you think about the Lebanese identity today?
Miyad, we have a problem of identity in Lebanon. You would speak to someone who's Christian, unfortunately, or to someone who's Muslim, everyone will tell you a different narrative. And every time, even if it's not like an actual fight, but it's a Twitter war, let's say, between hashtags, we are Phoenicians, we are not, I don't know, whatever that is. We have an identity crisis, and it starts by having a history book for everyone. You know, it's more dangerous for a country to leave it with a chattered history, if you want to say it, instead of creating a history book that no one agrees to. But we need like to start having a history, a clear history, regardless if it's right or wrong. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but we need to agree on something and start from there, because you cannot build a country. People are speaking about confederalism. People are, we don't agree if we're Arabs or not. It's fact. It's sad, but it's facts. So we need to do that first, and we need to get out of sectarian narratives, of sex-centric politics, and that's why I'm saying a secular state is only the beginning. It's not a solution. And every time something happens, like also in Syria and wherever in Yemen, they're falsely framed as sectarian, while sectarian identity is only a tool by the system and the politicians to ameliorate their positions in the state. But could you tell me, like, okay, we fight in the name of the Muslims, let's say Sunni or Shia, or in the name of the Christians, but could you tell me on the ground what did they benefit from? Nothing. Everyone is leaving. You couldn't find, now you don't want to see how much people are leaving. What did sectarian identity gave us? We need to create an identity for the country. It doesn't matter what it is. Look at the United States. You have maybe thousands of identities if you want to dissect them, but they made a country. They gave them, let's say, a political identity, and they're mobilized and convinced to fight wherever they want, you know? So that's a problem.
Hadi, thank you very much, and this was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for hosting me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching and listening to us. Please don't forget to subscribe.